Hi, I am Ali Sharp. I'm with the RiNo Art District, and I'd like to welcome you all to our very first Tools for the Creative Life of 2022. Today we have simple strategies for mental wellness and goal setting in 2022 with Jesse Huebner. Tools for the Creative Life is a workshop series aimed at providing creatives with connection, new skills, inspirational capital, and tools to craft a healthy creative ecosystem. These are presented in partnership by the RiNo Art District, Transforming Creatives, CBCA, and the Creative Integration Initiative. But before I go any further, we'd like to go right into a brief land acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge that the land we live, work, and create on is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We intentionally recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. We honor elders past, present, and future, and all those who have stewarded this land through generations. We recognize that government, academic, and cultural institutions were founded upon and continue to enact exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples. We also recognize that much of our nation was built by the hands and on the backs of enslaved Africans and Indigenous peoples. We stand in awe of their resilience and creativity, and we express gratitude for and celebrate their past and ongoing contributions. We strive to never take for granted the privilege and complexity of living, working, and creating on this land, and intentionally honor Black, Indigenous, and communities of color in our city. We commit to cultural equity and strive to make this a safe and welcoming space where healing can occur, truths can be told, hidden stories unearthed, and legacies of oppression and inequity continually dismantled. Also, we are dedicated to presenting this event inclusively. We do encourage you to update your name to include your pronouns if you so desire. Before we dive in, I'd like to hand it over to our partners and give them each a brief moment to introduce themselves. So first up, we have Meredith with CBCA.
Thanks. I think I always get to go first. Maybe we'll switch up the order. Hi, everyone. I'm Meredith Badler. I'm the Deputy Director at the CBCA, which is the Colorado Business Committee for the Arts. We are delighted to be part of this partnership as part of our ongoing work to provide professional development, business skills, tools, and trainings to artists and creatives in the state. Our mission is all about advancing the creative economy here in Colorado, doing that through the intersection of arts and business. And we do a lot at that intersection, from, statewide advocacy efforts to connecting artists to attorneys for pro bono legal help. So I'll throw some links in the chat. Really excited for today's presentation. I don't remember who comes after me, so maybe I'll just kick it back to Ali to announce the next person.
Hi, this is Teague with Creative Integration Initiative. Thank you so much, Meredith. It's really fantastic to be collaborating with you at CBCA. I just wanted to introduce myself really briefly. Very excited to be a part of this collaboration from Creative Integration Initiative, where our mission is to be a beacon for creative vitality through education, coaching, and curation of the visual arts. And just with that brief adieu, very much looking forward to Jesse. So I'm going to pass it straight over to John, the Executive Director from Transforming Creatives. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Teague. I appreciate that. Grateful to be with you all. Transforming Creatives is a nonprofit serving Denver's arts and culture sector. We invest in creatives so they can invest in the health of society. And part of our work includes operating creative workspace, where I am right now, in the RiNo Art District, called Converge Denver. And Converge is home to filmmakers and photographers and visual artists and designers and writers and other super creative folks. We also provide micro grants through our Artists of Color Fund, moving financial resources into communities of color, one artist at a time. And as a result of the pandemic, we have been deepening our investment in the mental wellness of creatives. In fact, in March, we're going to be hosting a trauma-informed weekend intensive for creatives that will help them unpack personal challenges and and patterns of behavior that show up as a result of adverse childhood experiences. And we'll have some information on our website in a day or two on that. But one of our key participants in that workshop is actually our speaker today. And I'm super jazzed for you to meet Jesse Huebner and have him lead us through this conversation on mental wellness and goal setting. I have known Jesse for like, I don't know, 7 years, yes, something like that, 7, 8 years, something like that. And have had the privilege of working with him in a number of settings, including a 6-week wellness series that he led at Converge just prior to the pandemic. He's a counselor in private practice and has also worked for years and years in community mental health centers both in Dallas and Aurora. And I know him to be just a great listener and also someone who can offer great insight and wisdom, but who does so just very authentically as kind of a fellow traveler, if you will, rather than someone who's been there, done that, and has all the answers. So I'm excited for you to meet him. Jesse, thank you so much for guiding this conversation today. I'm just going to hand it directly over to you and let you get us started.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks, John, for those kind words as well. If I would have known that he was going to say so much, I would have told him not to say so much. But that's honoring. Appreciate that. And thank you for our host as well. Appreciate the invitation, the opportunity to be here. So I am excited about this topic personally. I think that it's something. Part of the reason I love what I do is I find a lot of meaning and value in the conversations I get to have with people and the things that I learn and take from that myself as well. And so that's part of the reason I'm excited about this topic. I'm also excited about this community, the art community here in Colorado and Denver, because I have a particular passion for that as well. My wife is primarily an artist and often involved in a lot of creative projects and creative endeavors and whatnot. And so I'm stoked to be part of this. I want to just kind of set the stage about what to expect today and to also try to facilitate a safe place for some participation from you all. In a previous career, I was in learning and development, and something I'm always mindful of is trying to create a communal learning experience. And so I think that that's kind of spoken to in this being called a workshop. If this was in person, the idea of a workshop is that we are working through challenges and barriers together, that there's this real communal participative element to it. And so what you're not going to get today is a bunch of text-heavy PowerPoint, a bunch of magic wand formulas to transform your mental wellness and your goals. What I hope to create is a communal experience here today where we're able to participate together and to contribute our own thoughts and our own wisdom. Part of what I believe in the work that I do and everybody that I interact with is that there is a deep well of wisdom within each one of us. And my role I see as a facilitator is to help you draw from that well of wisdom and that you can transform your own life with that wisdom and also your community. Obviously, I think many of you that are here are doing that probably through your creative endeavors and your art, that wisdom that you have within you that you're able to draw from and give to those around you. I want to create that same thing today. So I'm very much not going to be presenting. I'm very much not going to be lecturing or teaching. That's just not my style. That's just not my MO. So I do hope that there is a facilitated communal learning process here today. Part of that is having community kind of ground rules as far as what do we want this to look like. And so what I would love for you to do, and I don't know, I think probably by this point, most people use Zoom, but I want to just kind of draw your attention to a few key ways ways to participate. You can at any time feel free to come off mute. I would love to get your input, your questions, your comments as we go. We'll have a time for questions at the very end, but I really want it to be a workshop, in that sense of what barriers or challenges are you facing over the different topics that I hit on. And so that's one way. I also know that that's not everybody's preference, coming off mute with a bunch of strangers, totally okay. The chat is there for you to do that, and I would love for you to do the chat. You can also do some things like raise hand with those reactions. There's a little reaction button there. You can give applause. Maybe someone says something you really resonate with. Feel free to do that. And then you've got some other fun little reaction items there. So do please use those. And so those are a couple of the housekeeping things. So what I want to do at this point is, you've heard us talk a lot. You've heard me talk. I would love to get to know you all a little bit. And just for the sake of time, I would love you all to share via the chat a couple things about yourself. Don't worry, I'm not gonna make you be super vulnerable here with a bunch of strangers or anything like that. But I would love to know your name. And so obviously that'll be there when you chat in the chat. We'll see your name. If you could tell us who you are, not just what you do, but specifically who you are, and I'll give an example of that. Where you're coming from, if you're here in Denver, or where you're at. And then also, do you regularly set goals? Is that part of your weekly process, monthly, annual process, or maybe that's not something you do? That's totally okay as well. Okay, so just to review those things, so you're gonna share your name, who you are, where you're calling in from, and then if goals are part of your regular practice. So I will use myself as an example. My name is Jesse, and he, him. I see myself first and foremost as a father. I am also a dog owner, 2 dogs, 2 wild dogs. You hear them barking on the background. That's why I'm at home right now. And I'm here in Aurora, actually, is where I'm calling in from. And I would say goal setting at best, and here is totally a point of just honesty, is probably infrequent at best for me. And so this is definitely preaching to the choir for sure. So something that I could also use the benefit from. So go ahead and feel free to put that into the chat. I'd love to know who you are, where you're calling in from, if you set goals. Awesome, seeing some stuff come in. I'm just going to read through them as we're sharing. I definitely see some themes for sure. Awesome. Yeah, so sometimes we get trapped into, well, I don't know if trapped is the right word. It's the word that comes to mind though. Sometimes we get trapped into goal setting being very much around what we do and the projects we're involved in, which of course are important, right? Those are kind of some natural timeframes are built into that. The way that I'm going to tie this in today with goal setting and mental wellness is exactly that, talking about how does goal setting influence our mental wellness, and some simple strategies, as the name kind of says, around some goal setting tips that you can use in all parts of life. Personal development, relationships, career, your hobbies, your passions, things like that. So these will definitely be applicable to a lot of that. Thank you for everyone who has shared. I love hearing what people do and where they're calling in from. I love it. Do keep sharing if you haven't yet. I'd love to know who you are. Awesome. Awesome. Great. Very good. Well, thank you so much for everyone for sharing. It's good to know you. And if you haven't yet, do feel free to share still, and we will. I would love to read that. So I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint. I do have a PowerPoint. What you're going to find in this PowerPoint, though, is it's going to be very quiet and a lot of space for us to just kind of share. And so I'll be sharing my own thoughts about as we go through, but I would love for you all to share what comes to mind as well, and barriers. I might have to be flipping back and forth. So just as far as, the technology goes, if I'm flipping back and forth between the chat and the PowerPoint, that's why. Okay. Oops. All right. So here's our topic again for today, simple strategies for mental wellness and goal setting. I want to first guide us before we get into the rest of the slides. I find that grounding and having a guided meditation, mindfulness activity really kind of helps center me at the very least. I know that other people can also feel a sense of maybe just fragmented, arrival to what this is today, especially on a Thursday afternoon. Of course, there's the beautiful snow coming down, which I think helps us ground as well. But I would invite you to just follow along. I'm going to guide us through a grounding exercise. And I actually love the land acknowledgement that we started off the session with today. And the grounding exercise I'm going to guide us through is actually about being connected to the earth and being connected to the ground that we are on. So you might want to draw a little bit from that imagery as well, that the land we are on is borrowed land. And we are here as not permanent residents of this land. This is not our land. And so that's a good image to pull into your mind with this as well. So you may want to go off camera. That's totally okay to do. If you're comfortable closing your eyes, that's great. I'm going to close my eyes. So just find a comfortable spot in wherever you're sitting or if you're standing. And if you're able to place your feet on the ground below you, if you have your feet crossed, I'd invite you to uncross your legs and have your feet planted on the ground beneath you. Notice your breathing. Notice your breath, if you're able, breathing through the nose, just doing a few exhales and inhales. If you're able, breathe in through the nose and hold it briefly for a few moments, and exhale throughout the mouth. Just draw some awareness to your body. Is there somewhere in your body you're feeling some tension, some stiffness? For me, it's often in my shoulders and my neck that I hold a lot of the tension and stress in. And so just kind of situate yourself wherever you're seated to find a comfortable spot. I'd like you to take your hands and rest your hands on your legs and just kind of bring some awareness to your body. Give some thanks and gratefulness for your body being here today in this moment. If you're able, notice your feet. Notice your feet inside of your shoes. Maybe you're not wearing shoes. Just wiggle your toes if you're able. Notice your feet planted on the ground. I want you to imagine that there are roots coming out of your feet, and these roots extend deep into the earth beneath you. And these roots go wide and they hold you secure to the ground that's beneath you. Draw that awareness back to your breath. And on the next inhale, I want you to imagine that as you breathe in, that they're drawing this energy, this warmth out of the earth. The earth is giving you this nourishment and this life. Sit there with that image for a few moments. And as the wind blows in a tree, and just kind of imagine as you might sway back and forth, there's things that feel insecure or things that feel a bit wandering right now. Let this image bring you back to some centeredness and to some grounding and being connected to the earth. Imagine that energy pulsing into your body from those roots. So on the next breath or two, I invite you to come back Turn your camera back on. If you have a camera, open your eyes. Well, thank you for following along with me in that. I hope you found some grounding in that. I think that whenever we get into content or about our meetings, about our days, it's so easy to just kind of go and to move about and to kind of two ships passing in the night, so to speak. And so I want to just kind of bring our awareness to that. So, learning objectives. What do we hope to accomplish today? So I have a list of some things I hope to impart upon you or share with you. Certainly, like I said, this is not a magic formula. I don't have any kind of magic wand. If I did, I would be, making bonko bucks, I'm sure. But I don't believe that. I don't believe that there is a special formula. I think that there are some themes that I notice a lot in people, and I want to share those with you and some ideas on goal setting and mental wellness. But first, I want to know a bit more about why you're here and to make sure that I hit on things that you hope to get out of this space. So I noticed that actually a little bit already in some of the chat that some people are saying about things that they're wanting to learn or why they showed up today. So if we could go back there to the chat again and to share, are there a couple things that you're hoping to get out of this content today? And that way I want to make sure that I at least try to incorporate a little bit of what everybody is showing up for. So go ahead and go into the chat there and share with us, what are you hoping to learn today? Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Meredith. Appreciate that. Yeah, prioritization, making peace. I love that imagery. Yeah, just any tools. Appreciate that. Thank you, Nicole. Coping with uncertainty for sure. Yeah, giving yourself grace. Thank you. Prioritization. Yeah, and after the prolonged isolation, the pandemic, absolutely. Focus. Short-term goals. Yeah, great, awesome, thank you. I'm seeing a couple different themes for sure that it will definitely be things we hit on, and some of them will be a bit more on the fringe as well. What I would invite you to do is throughout the content today, if you find that by the time we get to the end, when we get to the questions and discussion time or comments, feel free to share that up. If you feel like something wasn't addressed that you were hoping to get out of it, I would love to dialogue about that and give you some suggestions or some brainstorming around ways that we can help you troubleshoot. Okay. Thank you for sharing there. So let me talk a little bit about what to expect here in the content I'm going to share. First of all, I want to talk about how goal setting influences our mental wellness. When I was talking with John, oh man, I think it's been a couple months back, perhaps, when he was kind of talking to me about this group, and we're always talking about different ideas and things like that, it seems like, and this idea came up around mental wellness and goal setting. And at first I was kind of like, I'm not really sure how we can tie these in, but then really, as I kind of peeled back the layers and did some self-reflection on the process, I think there's actually a lot of overlap, and so I wanted to share that with you and talk a little bit about some strategies around that. We're going to talk about celebrating your wins. This is a piece that I often see so overlooked in goal setting. Even as I was doing some reading online about other goal setting, strategies and tips, this is one that I actually didn't even see it come up at all. So we're going to be talking about how does that involve with goal setting. We're going to then talk about leveraging what already has worked for you and how to identify that and how to draw from the things that you have done and the things that you're doing right already. I think sometimes goal setting can feel a little bit like not doing it right. And there's always this drive to be different and always this drive to do things better or differently. And we're going to talk about some ways to counteract that thinking. We're also going to be recognizing how to measure progress for progress, that even if you're not hitting your goals fully or even halfway, but how do we recognize where there is progress, and how do we call that out for what it is? I'll tell you right now, that's probably one of the topics that I work with individuals in my practice. Probably the most common is that they're the voices that are like, it's not enough, I didn't go far enough, I didn't achieve enough. And it's like having that ability to be able to recognize those little increment steps that are moving toward the change you're trying to reach, or that goal you're trying to reach. So we're going to talk about that. And lastly, we're going to talk about some core values. And that was kind of my intention a little bit there at the beginning with some introductions. Is, we're so used to like, what do you do questions, and as opposed to who are you? And I find that just kind of tweaking some questions like that can kind of tap into that part of our brain that is about this core value piece. What are my values? Who really am I? And how are we incorporating that into the goals we're setting? So we're gonna talk about that as well. Okay. So what do mental wellness and goals have in common? Well, it's true that, the fact is that pretty much everybody I work with, I try to help them set some goals. Now, it doesn't mean that the goals need to be set in stone. In fact, I'm not really that one to prescribe to the thought that goals should be immovable, right? That once we set a goal, we should just keep working toward that. But I find that setting goals and having a goalpost that we're moving toward really helps give us some direction and help give us some purpose. Even when you are kind of floating throughout the day or throughout the week, feeling a bit like, what am I working toward, right? Where am I trying to go? Where am I trying to get? I feel like nothing is working. I'm feeling stuck. I'm feeling burnt out. I'm feeling frustrated, whatever it is. If you're able to look back on that goal, that can be a source of encouragement. It can be a source of grounding. It can be a source of also motivation to say, okay, yeah, this is what I'm working toward. Now, of course, if you're finding constant frustration with that goal, I think that could be a good reason to revisit that goal. Maybe it needs to be refined or needs to be changed. But having those goals can give you that sense of kind of some direction and some alignment, right? So without mental wellness, I believe there is this high potential that goals will also lack purpose in alignment. And this is a bit of I think which came first, chicken or the egg type of dynamic, because I do think having goals improves our mental wellness. But I also believe that when we work on our mental wellness and when we're taking care of ourselves and when our self-care, and we're able to tap into what is important to us, what's important to me, and why is this goal important to me, then we're able to draw that purpose and that alignment into the goals we're setting. I find it to be true that a lot of people, I think, and I'm certainly not innocent of this either, but, we see other people reaching goals, or we see other people accomplishing, big milestones or making progress. And we feel like we need to set a goal that somehow is similar, because that must be the answer, right? That the goal that they had set worked for them, so I want to set the same goal. And I find that, really when we're able to go back to that alignment piece and that purpose piece, I believe that that's really the most influential piece, is that if your goals are aligned and they're able to tap into your own purpose and that you have this mental wellness piece driving that goal setting process, I think there's a lot more potential for success. And not only that, but I think there's also the likelihood that it'll be sustained is much higher, right? Because if it wasn't your goal to start with, and if it wasn't really your purpose and alignment to start with, how likely is that going to be sustained? How long is that change going to exist? Probably not super long, right? And so I think that's a really important part to start with, is this mental wellness. And and then moving into setting some of those goals. Now, on the other side of the coin, I think that goals also provide scaffolding for our mental wellness and for our self care, for our well-being, right? And I like this imagery of scaffolding. It's actually from Piaget, if you know, early researcher and contributor to the psychology field and human development. He used this imagery of scaffolding, right? And so that's where I kind of draw from that image of here. And of course, in Denver, especially downtown, there's like scaffolding everywhere right now. So this should be a pretty vivid image, maybe not always the best image, but we have things in life that are scaffolding, right? We have maybe a support network, we have friends, we have colleagues, maybe hopefully a supportive family or a supportive family member at least, maybe a mentor, maybe a counselor, maybe a coach. There's all of these things in life that can give us scaffolding to move about and to be secure and to build upon where we're trying to go, right? To reach these higher levels, to add these layers onto the things that we're trying to build. And without that scaffolding, it's literally impossible, to reach those levels, to put windows in the building or to put paint on the buildings and to finish that structure. Without the scaffolding, it's literally impossible. Well, I mean, maybe you could figure out another way to do it, but I'm not sure it would be as easy, right? It would certainly be much more challenging. And I think in the same way, our own goals that we set, whether it's a goal for a job or a goal for a career, a goal for a passion, a goal for a project, personal development, faith, spirituality, or community, whatever that goal is, setting those goals, I believe, provides scaffolding in that same sense for us. And in these three key ways. One, grounding. What do I mean by that? So in the same way that we just kind of did a grounding exercise, I believe that another source of grounding can be those goals, right? That looking back on, as I kind of mentioned, and maybe there's a feeling of fragmentedness, if you will, today of not really sure the purpose and the drive. And so these goals can help kind of provide some of that scaffolding and that grounding around what you're moving toward. I think goals also provide a sense of self-efficacy, that what you are doing is strong, that you are brave, that you are resilient, that you are capable, that you are wise, right? So there's this sense of self-efficacy that comes in goals, that it is possible, and having hope for those changes and those positive things in the future is not it's not foolish. That's actually a really great thing, to look out into the future and to say, I hope to be able to reach that. That's a really amazing thing to do. And so tapping into that self-efficacy, I think goals can help us do that. The last piece here, I think that comes to my mind, that how goals serve as a form of scaffolding, is around of self-confidence, right? And I think this is a bit of a double-edged sword, because when we set goals, we don't reach them, we lose confidence, right? There can be a sense of like, well, gosh, I thought I could do them, I couldn't do it. What I'm going to talk about, progress is progress. Even if you don't reach those goals, we're going to get to that, how to still draw confidence out of that process. I'm a big one. Part of the thing I use in my practice is what's called solutions-focused approaches, and it looks at any form of attempted solution is still a success, right? That even if you didn't fully reach that goal, or you didn't make the change or you were working toward, you made an attempt toward that. And there is something to be proud about. There is something to be confident about in that process. And, that also that mindset of, okay, I'm setting this goal, I'm confident that I can work toward it, right? That I can move toward that target, okay? Let me just pause here for a moment and just ask if there's any questions or comments about that. What resonates with you?
Oh, hi, this is Patrice Berry. What resonates with me is giving credit for small steps. I read a book called The Kazan Method, and It's a Japanese thought process of even the smallest progress is progress, and that we don't see the minute progress that we're making.
I love that. Would you mind sharing that in the chat? I would love to look that up. I totally resonate with that. I love that thought. I also see Nicole. Thank you for your thought on that there too. Goals can give a sense of grounding. And I think that there is also this mindset with goals that goals can be our friend, right? I think that, okay, I'm going to show some of my cards here, and that's fine. That goal setting can feel a bit capitalistic sometimes, you know, in that there's this Western society drive toward always self-improvement, always making goals and always trying to change. When I think actually goals can be our friend when we think about it in these ways that we're discussing now. See more stuff coming in from the chat. Thank you for all sharing there. So I would invite you, as well as people are sharing in the chat, to just draw your attention there. I don't want to leave anybody out. Some great additional comments here and thoughts. Yeah, it takes courage and willingness to take risks. Absolutely. Yeah, I like that image as well, Nicole, of lassoing in all the thoughts. Another great image there. Yeah, and disengaging from the capitalistic hustle. Absolutely, absolutely. All right, well, thank you for contributing in that way. Oh, and thank you, Patrice, there for the author name. I'm going to definitely look that up afterwards. Sounds like a great resource. So here are a couple, we're going to kind of transition into some specific strategies around goal setting. And what I think you may find, some of this stuff I think you'll resonate with, but I think you will find that this is not totally in the traditional sense of like, okay, here's the SMART formula. I'm sure we've all heard the SMART format, and you know, don't get me wrong, I've used the SMART format before, and SMART definitely gets you at least kind of a canned goal statement as far as you know, here's what I'm working toward, right? So fine, if if that's part of what you do, I'm not going to knock it. That's great. That's not what I'm going to give you today. I'm going to give you some strategies that I think we oftentimes totally blow past and skip out when we're setting goals. And number one to that is looking back. And what do I mean by looking back? Well, here we are at the new year. You know, I think it's a good chance to look back on the previous year, but also just month by month, or even literally week by week, or even day by day, right? If you're a journaler, or if that's a practice that maybe you've been curious about trying, is having a process where you look back on what you accomplished, right? And this requires tapping into that mindset of progress is progress, that even if you didn't achieve many goals, or maybe even no goals that you set last year, what kind of accomplishments did you make? So looking back and tapping into that wisdom of your past self, I think that's another thing that we often leave out in this is what did I accomplish before, and what is working, right? And we're going to talk about how to draw from that. So this, what did you accomplish last year? And I put it in this frame just because here we are at the new year. I think there's this real drive around, okay, it's the new year. What do I want to accomplish in 2022? You know, when is the pandemic going to go away? When can we get back to quote unquote normal life? And not reflecting back. I think that this can also, I just want to put the warning out there that sometimes this can feel a bit scary, right? To look back on what was last year like. For some people, I want to acknowledge and recognize that could have been a very incredibly difficult year, right? That especially, you know, from a finance standpoint, I know the pandemic has had a significant impact on the art and the creative community, obviously, and that you know, there can be some scary things in wanting to look back. And so that can be a process I would encourage you to do in a mindset that feels safe, in a mindset that feels that you're in a good place to do that, because looking back can bring up some of those things of you know, what didn't I do right or what didn't work. But what I want you to focus on is what have you accomplished? What did I accomplish last year? And we're going to talk about why that's important here in a little bit, to acknowledge what you have accomplished. Because I believe that all of us have accomplished something, right? That there is some element that you can look back on to say, okay, look at what I gained, or look at what I improved, or look at what I refined, or can look at differently looking back. It may even be something that you thought in a moment wasn't progress at all, and now looking back, you might realize, hey, that actually does feel like a positive shift. And so that's a really good step one, is looking back. And when we're looking back, it's important that we celebrate our wins. This is another thing that I just see totally blown past, right? I don't know how many people know the Enneagram. I'm a type 7, which is very much on the kind of flash in the pan, wanting to do new things all the time. And I have this real cathartic buildup to achieving a change or a goal. And then as soon as it happens, it's like, okay, I'm not a good one to celebrate accomplishments and to celebrate wins. And so this is something for myself that I find to be particularly true, is to really putting a post in the ground to say, okay, look at what I have accomplished, right? And I find that literally some type of tactile element in your life can be a good way to exemplify that progress you've made, those accomplishments you've achieved. Again, journaling could be a good way to do that, but even elements, something that you can put that would remind you as you pass by it, or as you, day to day, you can remind yourself and celebrate those wins, right? And this also requires, again, this is something that I don't think I always do the best at, is some vulnerability to share with others the things you are accomplishing, right? There can be a sense of like, am I being too prideful? Am I being too boastful? I want to hear what other people are accomplishing, and all that is great and true, but it would require you to share with others the celebratory process, right? And I think that is particularly true with goals and mental wellness. Is I believe that we are intended as humans to be in community and have communal experiences together, and celebratory experiences in particular, I think can be really, really impactful. So if this is not something you do as part of your goal setting, celebrating your wins is a big part of this, I believe. Being able to give yourself that, again, that self-efficacy, that confidence piece around, look at what I have accomplished, look at where I am going. This is a big part. I want to just also verbally acknowledge right now, so that you can leave today knowing confidently that somebody else is telling you you are doing a lot right. I find that a lot of people that come to me for coaching or counseling, they're usually kind of at their wits' end, or they're maybe at the bottom of the barrel. And one of the first things I do, and I want to just acknowledge today, is that there are a lot of things you're doing right. Sometimes those few things that aren't working, or those few things that maybe you're doing wrong, or that are barriers you're hitting, become the sole focus, right? And it's like, I'm doing so much wrong, nothing is working. Well, I want to be the voice of to counter that, to say you are doing a lot right, and that is good, right? That you are doing things well. And I don't know the details about what your life looks like, but I can confidently say that. And it may feel a bit like, well, it doesn't really feel that way, and I get that, I acknowledge that. But I want you to just know that by celebrating your wins, that's a way of reminding yourself there are things you are doing well, that you're doing right. Goal setting is not just about trying to fix the problems or trying to do things in a different way. Okay. So as we're looking back, we want to now draw from, as we have identified what worked, what we accomplished last year. We celebrate those wins. The next thing we want to kind of peel back are the layers around why did that work, right? And identifying the situation, identifying the parameters, for example, mindset. It could also be time and place, right? It could be a location thing. Is there something about where I was at in life that made that progress work, or was able to influence that goal? And so we want to look at those parameters around what worked. And again, this is a part of that piece of what you are doing a lot right. And I really think it is a bit about fine tuning and tweaking the scenarios and tweaking the mindset or the way that we're showing up to our goals. I think that's a big part of setting new goals and making progress on our goals is this fine tuning. And it's important that we look back on what has worked and understanding that it's not all about changing things, right? And in fact, sometimes it's not even about changing anything. It's more about how do I leverage what worked and build that into my day to day. I just wanted to take a look at the chat. Awesome, love that point there, Will. Absolutely. I'm curious, Will, would you be open to sharing more about that verbally?
Can you hear me now?
We can, yeah.
Am I okay? What I really mean there is sometimes you'll do everything you think you should be doing and getting there all the way, and at the very end, something is a failure. And I don't think that failure is actually a good word. I don't know what another word would be, but it's like to at least learn from what you did accomplish towards that goal. It's like on your scaffolding, getting to the top, and then the whole scaffolding crashes down, and it wasn't your fault. You know, it's like, but you did do everything correct, and then some of the things you didn't, you can learn from. You know, because I know I've always learned more from failure than I've learned from success. Like, you know, if I sing something and I'm trying to sing a high B natural and it doesn't quite come out, I go, well, what did I do that led to that, and how can I change that? So that's really what I meant, is that if everything is for success, then that builds up a lot of tension and a lot of what I'm seeing is a lot of people that are very distressed about what's happening in their careers. And a lot of it, they can't control that. I was over in Vienna, did one performance, we were supposed to do 8, they closed the whole country down and we all had to leave. And it's like, that's nothing you had any control over. And then you're looking at substantial amount of money that's been lost. But you know, but then learning that when that old adage, don't count your chickens till they hatch, you know, it's like, don't rely on all that money, because at least in the last couple of years, it may not happen. And so I just want to make sure that failure wasn't even seen in such a negative light. It's just something that happens.
I love that. Thank you, Will. And thank you for sharing your example. I love that. I appreciate the openness with that. Of absolutely right, that this idea of, and I agree. We have such a limited vocabulary, I feel like, in the English language, that failure doesn't really capture the essence of what you're saying. And so absolutely. And Leah, I see that you had something along the similar lines. But I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing verbally as well, kind of what that brought up in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also a performer, and it's taken me a long time to get to the point of releasing an expectation that I have in mind for the outcome of a performance, and instead walking into a situation and trusting that I've done the work that will lead to success. And even if things don't go like perfectly, then I can still, like, maybe this is a little weird, but like detach my emotions from that expectation of perfection and be able to observe what happened without emotion and move forward, knowing that X thing happened. Okay, we're going to address that this next time, but it doesn't mean that I am a failure because I messed up one little thing. I had the opportunity to improve upon it moving forward.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea there of the detachment with the emotion piece. I actually really resonate with. And what I might expand on that is to say then to attach it to a different part of that process, right? So it kind of going back to that alignment piece of where are we aligned in this goal, right? If the alignment is only on reaching this particular target, this level of perfection, if that's where we're aligned, if that's where we're attached, then of course there can be, a lot of distress and a lot of, emotional turmoil. But instead, if we're aligned with, okay, here is the process, what is the progress, I think that there can be a lot of sense of fulfillment, and that, at least we are moving toward that, or what are we learning from that, right? And what actually did work well, right? And celebrating those pieces of that. So love that. Thank you to you both. I appreciate that. So actually, that's a perfect segue here with what worked, right? So as we were kind of unpacking that, of looking at what did work, right? So in both of these scenarios, with Will, you mentioned they're preparing for several performances over in Vienna. I mean, wow, what an accomplishment that must have taken to get to that point, right? And so there's still a lot of pieces along that process of what worked, right? And you might be able to draw from that in the future as well. Now knowing that, here's what it took to get us to that point, right? And you may be able to in the future do it more efficiently or more effectively, perhaps less stressfully, although that sounds like a stressful bit of coordination, I'm sure. And Leah, the same thing, right? That for any kind of dance or performance, for sure, there's these pieces that takes a lot, right? And I'm preaching to the choir, obviously, with this, that once you're on stage or once your piece of art is finished or on display, that is the end point, perhaps in a way, of the whole process that was leading up to that, right? And so being able to unpack those pieces of what worked for us to be able to get to that point. And of course, maybe it wasn't perfect or not exactly as you envisioned it might be, but there's a whole lot of steps that took to get you to that point that I think are really good pieces that we can leverage. And that's kind of the term I want us to focus on here with you have the resource, all the reasons to be optimistic. And so that goes back to that piece again, that you are doing a lot of the things right. I find it to be true for a lot of people that the sense of hope, I think, is particularly diminished right now with the pandemic and things. Every week things are changing. The CDC is just kind of pulling rules out of the air now, and we don't really know what to expect week to week. And financial markets are all over the place, and communities are constantly changing. It can feel foolish to have hope, but I want to say that by looking back, celebrating our wins, identifying what works, you have all of the reasons already to be optimistic. That it's a good thing to hope that things will be different, that things can get better, because they can. I believe that very, very deeply, that there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. And we want to then leverage what worked, right? So this idea of leverage, and this idea of how do we draw upon that, because we all have only a limited number of resources. We have a limited amount of energy. We have a limited amount of ability, right? And that's just the reality. But the fact is there's also leverage, right? And leverage gives you an advantage over some of those situations, those cards you've been dealt. I watched, I'll have to find the video, but there's this YouTuber that's this like brainiac science guy. And he was demonstrating how there's actually been, this blew my mind. There's been this vehicle that's been created. It's not like for transportation. It's just kind of to prove a point. And they set it up in the desert, and it's got this giant wind turbine on the top. It doesn't have any kind of mechanical engine or any kind of propulsion other than just the air that blows it. And as the turbine moves, it sends the power down to the wheels. And what they're able actually to demonstrate is that it can actually move faster than the energy that it's capturing than the wind. And there was a lot of debate about this, that you shouldn't be able to move faster because eventually there'll be some resistance, or eventually it must be because they're going downhill slightly, and then all of a sudden as they go back uphill they slow down. What they're actually able to show is that it was through a mechanical leverage. Is actually through a lever, essentially. I won't go into all the depths. I would probably do a horrible job explaining it. But that just stuck really with me, that, man, here we are with this ability to leverage these resources and leverage what has worked, and to create new energy, right? And to create new momentum out of that, right? And even when other people think something may not be possible, even when we ourselves may feel like something isn't possible, I think this idea of leverage really gives us a sense of this optimism and a sense of hope. Okay. So use the celebration to fuel your next goal, right? So I like that idea of the sense of celebration, the sense of recognizing what has worked can be that motivation, that momentum, the fuel as we're setting some new goals. So baseline. This is something that I see some people do. I'm not sure that it's something that is taught very commonly, but when we're setting goals, as we have identified our accomplishments, we've celebrated those accomplishments, we've looked at what's worked, we now want to say, okay, where am I today? So establishing a baseline. Right? So if you are, for example, I'll just use a self-care example, right? Maybe your goal is you want to do a form of self-care every single day. That's your goal. Well, if you haven't identified the baseline, which is maybe you're only doing self-care once a day or once a week, and you're trying to reach 7 days a week, that could be a pretty substantial goal, right? So by looking back and identifying our accomplishments, identifying what's worked, we can then come to our present and say, okay, here's where I am at today. Here's where my baseline is at, right? Here's what I've been doing really well. And then as we look at what the next goal is, what the next step is, I would encourage you to think about this idea of easy wins. There's something actually in some research recently that has shown there's a substantial amount of influence on the success of future goals based on the success early on in your goal setting. So said in another way, if you're able to accomplish a goal like in the first month, that's like a pretty easy, basic goal, that momentum you can carry on and it fuels you into those bigger goals, the next maybe a bigger, harder challenge, right? So there's nothing wrong with using that low-hanging fruit. I find that sometimes people are like, well, yeah, that's just kind of a given, right? Like I'm going to accomplish that goal next week. Well, why not recognize that as a goal and count that as an easy win, using that as a baseline for where you're going next, right? Because I find that when we establish that baseline and we look at, okay, my goal is actually perhaps 6, 7 other goals all kind of rolled up into one goal. And that's where if we have that baseline, we can really see, okay, what's actually the next step to reaching this bigger goal. I like this, I don't know if you're getting the picture of imagery. I'm really big on imagery, and I like this idea of base camp, right? And so, I've not been one to climb, huge mountains or anything like that, but I, watch documentaries. I kind of know about the process. And of course, they set up these base camps at the bottom of these huge mountains, right? And they do that because it would be a bit just wild, unwise, a bit bananas to go out there and just try and climb these huge mountains, right? So they've got these base camps, and even some of these really big mountains or some of the really challenging ones have several base camps where they refuel, where they rest, where they recharge before they go on to the next leg. Even though their goal is, to summit, they have these base camps where they go from step to step. And what I think is really beautiful about that is how we can also do something similar in our own life of what are these base camps that we're kind of setting up, right? Where are these smaller goals that are leading up to this bigger accomplishment? And even if the thought is like, well, yeah, I'm going to hit those goals anyway, but it's still counting those and recognizing those goals for what they are. And this is where this pulls into the piece of progress is progress. I find this to be probably one of the most transformative ways to look at goals and to keep us going. I noticed a couple of people earlier on saying, well, how do I recognize the progress when I don't reach the entire goal? And it starts with having a good baseline. It starts with recognizing where you are when you start out, right? And when you do that, you're able to then, let's say a month or 2 months, 6 months later, look back and say, well, look at where I started and how far I've come. even if you don't reach that goal fully, then you're able to see, okay, well, yeah, so maybe I'm not doing self-care 7 times a week, but I'm doing it 3 times a week. And before, a couple months ago, I was just doing it 1 time, a week. By having those baselines, we're able to see progress for what it is. It's still progress. And I find that that can be a real source of motivation. And it also then, when we practice kind of repeating the cycle, looking back on what we accomplished, what's worked, we can go back to that baseline and say, okay, well, look at where I was 6 months ago or 2 months ago, or whatever it might be, or even last week, being able to recognize that progress. Let me pause there. I threw a lot out. What's coming up in you? What do you resonate with that piece?
So for me personally, I'm looking at that like, oh my gosh, I have to reverse my language, right? That instead of saying, if we go with the same analogy of I want to do self-care every day of the week, and I've only done it 3 days of the week, I have to not beat myself up for the 4 that I miss, and instead celebrate the 3 that I did do. It's kind of a reversal.
I love that. Absolutely. Because again, we're like this human nature. We like look at the things we didn't do, the shortcomings, right? And so, yeah, I love that. I love the thought that to be able to celebrate what you did accomplish, for sure. What else? Doesn't also just have to be things you agree with. It could be pushback. I know there are certainly some that, the whole goal setting process is about reaching these goals, and want to open up any kind of dialogue that might be about that.
Jesse, your picture here with the base camp reminds me of my friend Wes, he lives in Golden, Colorado, but he's a mountain climber, and he goes these really great big mountains. Well, he wanted to tackle Mount McKinley in Alaska, and they do have 3 different base camps. Well, he got through the first 2, and then he got to the 3rd, and then this huge storm came up, so they could not go further. And yet he considered that was a success, that at least he got through number 1 camp, number 2, and number 3. He got as close as he was going to be able to. And looking back, I asked him when he got back, I said, what do you feel about this? Oh, I feel very successful. I could do it again, and then look and see if they could not have that weather happen, which you have no control over. But I just was always remembered that he felt that was a success, even though he didn't get completely to the top.
Yeah, what a great example. That's spot on. I love that. I love that piece too about, frankly, that's something totally out of our control. And I do think there are oftentimes, perhaps even more times than it's our own influence, there are things it's totally out of our control that influences having to pause or having to come back to a goal later. And yeah, I think that's key for sure. So thank you for that.
Well, COVID certainly is one of those that we don't have a lot of control over, especially in the performing arts.
For sure. Yeah, that is a big one for sure. And here we are trying to figure out a way to navigate all of that. And it's challenging too, because it also feels like when we have to shift goals or have to shift process, because of something out of our control, that can feel exhausting as well, right? And having to, feeling like we're starting off on a good foot, feeling like we've maybe done all these steps, and then something totally out of our control makes us change course. And that can be challenging for sure. I think again, though, with that piece of establishing a good base camp, a good baseline of where you're at, that can give you a sense of, okay, what is in my control, what is out of my control, and why wasn't I able to make progress further, perhaps. So yeah, for sure. Other thoughts about a baseline? All right. So I've got one more tip that I want to share with you all today, and I've talked about this a bit already, but it's this idea behind why, right? Why is this goal important? So there's this kind of phrase I like to use, and it's why this goal at this time for me? Again, I find that there is a drive to set goals based on what we're seeing others accomplish, or even based on what we were able to accomplish before, right? There can be that kind of double-edged sword, so to speak, of that, you know, we saw it work last year. Why isn't it working again this year, right? And so by asking ourselves why this goal at this time for me, we're able to shift our thinking back into that place of our own purpose, our own alignment, our own core values. Why is this goal important to me? And that can also help be a guiding, you know, beacon when we are feeling like, you know, why am I working toward this goal? What is this all about? And if you're having challenge, you know, answering that about why is this goal important to me, that could be a good indicator of, is that goal something that you are truly aligned with? Is that something that taps into your purpose, your being? And it very well initially may have difficulty answering that question. I'm not saying you need to change the goal, but you may need to just examine, do some interior work, and looking internally of, okay, where is my alignment with this? And it also may shift a little bit with that goal setting as well. There's this quote I really like by Audre Lorde, and it says, if I didn't define myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. Again, you know, beautiful imagery here in the words of being crunched into other people's fantasies. I think goal setting has this tendency to do this. I think in our careers, in our relationships, in our just self-development, when we set these goals that aren't based on how we have defined ourselves, what our own core values are, then there can be this real potential to be crushed into other people's fantasies and eaten alive. And I'm sure none of us want that. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of some self-reflection. And before I do that, though, I want to pause again. Thoughts coming up, comments, questions. All right. So I've got a worksheet that we're going to each do a little bit individually. I will also make sure that the worksheet gets sent out after this, and so you can actually maybe print it out and do it. It's not rocket science. It's nothing going to be life-changing in and of itself, but it hits on several of these things that we've talked about today. And I've noticed some people writing down already, which is great. I think that having a worksheet somewhere that we can tactile write things down can help us process information that way as well. So I want to do that in the remaining few minutes that we have before some questions and comments. So I'm going to do, if you bear with me a moment, I'm going to switch over to a PDF. Thumbs up if you can see a PDF that says goal setting worksheet. Okay, awesome, cool. Okay, so you're going to get this whole thing, so I'm not going to read this verbatim, but I want to just highlight a couple key things that I would encourage you to. We're going to take about 5 minutes to write out. So if you have a notepad next to you, a piece of paper that you can write down, there's 3 sections that we've kind of talked about today already as well. So we're going to talk about where am I currently, so that piece around a baseline. And you don't have to get all 3 right now in these 5 minutes. 5 minutes is not enough time to do all of this. So maybe just something, kind of jot down, where am I at currently? The next topic will be, where do I want to go? And then if it lets me scroll, there we go. The last one is, why is this important to me? So again, that is the piece around where am I at currently? Where do I want to go, and why is this important? So let's just take 5 minutes and just to do some internal reflection, what's been coming up for you today in this workshop so far, and just kind of jot down some ideas. All right, we will come back together here. I hope that kind of primes the pump to get things kind of thinking around this way. And perhaps if you're not someone that you set goals very often or very frequently, worksheets like this can be a good way to kind of integrate that, right? And to have a kind of more consistent approach to that, if you will, right? And this is just a start, of course, that then going and setting the goals and starting to work toward those involves part of that as well. But I really think that, as we talked about today, the looking back, celebrating your wins, leveraging what's worked, establishing your baseline, those are all really important key parts to it. So let me transition back to my PowerPoint. One more minute here for just kind of our final wrap up. So let's just review here what we accomplished. So we talked about how the influence that goals have into our mental wellness, and also vice versa, and how mental wellness can influence the goals we're setting as well. We talked about celebrating your wins, looking back on your accomplishments, then recognizing what's worked, leveraging what's worked. Progress is progress. It's important to recognize the a little bit of positive movement that you have had. And then lastly, why, right? So tapping into the core values. Why is this important? Why today and why for me? Here is, I just want to give some credit to all the art I used. I like to use Unsplash, and there's the artists that I used some of their art from today. I'm just going to go back to the beginning introductions when we talked about what you want to accomplish. And I want to just hit on anything that maybe we didn't get a chance to talk about. I also want to open up a chance for questions and comments. So feel free to chime in. What, again, something remaining for you, a particular barrier could be a good chance to workshop a barrier you're hitting, something that you're having challenges with. Yeah, what questions? Somebody shared at the beginning about endless to-do lists and long-term goals. And I want to just acknowledge that that's, I think, not abnormal, that we set these long-term goals and we don't necessarily think about the nearer goals, the 1 month out or 1 week out. And that worksheet, that's one of the reasons I actually put that 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. I think it can be a really good practice to be thinking about, okay, if this is my larger goal, there are several other steps always before it, right? So I think that's a really good part of how to do that middle piece of not just the daily tasks, right? Like those can get there's always things to do each day. And then there's always the 1 or 5 year goals. And I think that those are great as well. But thinking about the 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, quarters can be a good way to do that, thinking about your quarterly goals. And so thinking about how those roll into the larger goals as well. So that's one way to approach that. Will, let me pop over to you. Got your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. It's really basic to this. We talked about mental wellness, but that kind of assumes that a person is already kind of mentally okay. I have a student who is in terrible trouble right now. And I'm just wondering if goal setting could help him bring himself out of this deep hole he's in with a lot of depression and sort of antisocial behavior, that kind of stuff. I know I'm not a psychiatrist, he needs to see one, but I'm just wondering if some of this can work for somebody who is not mentally well, trying to work towards getting mentally well.
Absolutely, and that's where I would say definitely the goals can absolutely influence that for sure. I do work with some highly depressed individuals in my practice. It's not something that I see a ton of because frankly I'm not really equipped or resourced in private practice. And so there are certainly, for example, community mental health centers in the area. I definitely want to give a shout out to those resources. So that'd be like the Mental Health Center of Denver, Aurora Mental Health Center, All Health Network, which is in the southern Arapahoe and Douglas areas. And then up in Broomfield, it's called Mental Health Partners. and then Jefferson Center for Mental Health out kind of in the Western Slope area. So those would be a good resource for somebody who's really struggling. But I would say absolutely, even in your own role as a teacher or as a mentor, part of their support system in that way of helping them write down goals. I think absolutely, especially for depression, because the voice of depression always focuses on the way I describe it is it magnifies what's not working, and it minimizes the progress that you are accomplishing. And so by you being able to be that voice of reason, to be that kind of calling out, hey, look what you are accomplishing, something is at least working a little bit, I think that can absolutely help. But it sounds like this person probably needs some encouragement toward getting some more resources as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Will. I see someone mentioned there about setting goals more effectively, and I think that taps into that piece about looking back and establishing a good baseline. I'm not saying this is all the time, but I think the piece around effectiveness and also efficiency as well is when we're setting goals that are comprised of several other goals. And it can be also the fact that it could be several large goals actually leading up to that other goal. And so I think that's one of the ways is breaking them down can help us be more effective in our goal setting, is what are the first steps toward that process. I'm resonating a lot with the to-do lists. And the fact is, to-do lists and tasks all roll into some form of a goal. I think it may just be, I think I heard some people say or write down that you think about goals, maybe you don't necessarily document them or write them out. But I think that a lot of the tasks we do from day to day in our to-do list items actually speak to some of the larger goals that we maybe haven't acknowledged or haven't really thought through, of like, okay, what are all these tasks leading up to? What is this goal I'm supposedly moving toward? So that could be a good way to kind of think through that as well, your to-do list and whatnot. So we didn't really hit on the piece of prioritization, and I think that is another good spot to dive into in this moment. What's kind of coming to my mind of how do we prioritize goals, right? Because it would be an ideal world if we only had one goal. This is the goal I'm working on for the next 6 months. That's most likely not reality, right? We have many other competing goals that all feel like they have equal value and equal importance and equal risk if we don't accomplish them. And so finding peace with how we prioritize them, I think is a really good way to articulate that statement there, that at some point we do need to just prioritize, and there is no special formula, and in the sense of peace with that. What comes to my mind with that is looking back on the progress and just having a good way of reviewing what is working, what are you making progress on, and what might need to be shifted, right? Or what might need to be reprioritized. If something feels like it's not getting enough of your time, or something else is getting too much of your time. So I would say like a frequent way to revisit those goals. And so if you have a lot on your plate right now, I would encourage you to do something even more regularly as far as looking back. End of the week, it could be a good way to kind of wrap up your week as well. Okay, what did I accomplish this week? What have I made progress on? What needs to kind of be reprioritized going into next week? So that could be a good strategy for that piece. Yeah, the piece around the uncertainty, Will, you've shared about that as well, the uncertainty around the performing arts. I think, that we talked a lot about that today, as far as, by able to recognize what's in your control and what's out of your control. And even cognitively, we can be aware of that, right? That the pandemic is totally out of our control. And that still can leave us with a feeling of uncertainty and feeling, feeling that fragmentedness. And that's where I would come back to the grounding process of being able to reflect on your goals as a way of grounding and a way of recognizing the purpose of why you're moving toward this, right? You all all are in incredible passion-driven work that you all do. And so I know that there are these deep layers of the core values that can help give you that grounding, that even when things are out of control, you can come back into these uncertain times and have that grounding through that, right? Yeah, I noticed a few people as well just saying around the prioritization of creativity, talking about connecting with yourself. So what I would encourage you to do, and this is going to be kind of my parting statement, so I think this is well timed, is that even though mental wellness influences the goals we set, and goals can influence our mental wellness as well, I would say if it's not part of your practice currently to set mental wellness goals, that would be a really great takeaway from this workshop today, is even setting a goal specifically addressing your mental wellness. And where are you at today as far as stress, anxiety, depression, turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms, maybe having a little bit of a loss of sense of self? I would encourage you to set some type of goal around that, right? Where do you want to be the next couple of months, right? What it just in yourself, in your own self-being, what does that mental wellness look like? And what would feel good? Where would you hope to be in 3 months from now? Where do you hope to be with your mental wellness? Okay. All right, well, I really enjoyed talking with you all. I appreciate the participation. Let me stop sharing. I will be happy to share those slides, and then I'll also share that worksheet. And otherwise, I want to just give a few minutes, any kind of closing questions or comments.
Thank you, Jesse. That was an amazing workshop. And thank you again to our partners. Like Jesse said, we will send this video recording out after the workshop along with his resources. And stay tuned. We have monthly workshops coming up, and we will be releasing more details of that soon. Have a great day.